Hi guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College World podcast. Today, me and Nick are going to be looking at the Mountain West Championship game live from Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, 3 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox. 58.5 is the total. Broncos 2-point road favorites. Looking at that Boise offense, how much do they trust Talon Green? I think will be the biggest question here. Obviously, hasn't really grown as he, was expected this season. In the last couple of games, they've really just shut down the passing attack in effort of riding the wave behind what has been a strong rushing game. 3 games in a row where they've been under 20 passing attempts, and they've only had, 6 out of the last 7 under 25 passing attempts. So this is not going to be a pass-heavy offense by any means. 8 picks, 9 touchdowns, 55% comp rate, 1,526 yards. More importantly, though, 7 scores on the ground with almost 350 yards rushing for the 6'6", Louisville, Texas native. And the thing I love most about this offense, Ashton Gianti, this guy is a complete stud. 110 yards per game rushing, 13 scores, 537 yards through the air as well with another 5 scores. This guy's been the ultimate playmaker for Boise State in his 10 games. George Haloney's been great in his return. He's up to 534 yards in 5 scores, a bulk of that coming over the last month of the season. This rushing attack is dynamic, over 200 yards per contest. Gianti's high-flying through the air. Obviously, if they're forced to pass the ball, though, it could be a tough day.
Certainly could be a tough day if they're forced to pass the ball. This is a very good running unit that has some nice potential. Green has not quite been what we had hoped he would be for this Boise State offense, and it certainly reflects that with their stats through passing. Passer rating's not fantastic, right, at 137.114, 11 interceptions to 18 touchdowns total. A lot of those are split between Green and Madison, who's not playing anymore. Green, 55% comp rate, 1,500 yards, 9 touchdowns, 8 picks. So they're going to rely on the ground. They certainly have the opportunity to do so with a guy in Gentry who is fantastic, 1,100 yards on the ground, 6.1 yards per carry, and 13 scores for him. Good numbers overall. They do have some nice weapons and a wide receiver room, so if they do have to throw the ball, they do have some decently talented players to get to, but overall the passing game is not fantastic. It's going to rely on the run game, 5.28 yards per attempt on the ground, 29 scores on the ground as well. Certainly live and die by the rushing attack at this point. Green for himself, he has 7 scores on the ground and 346 plus 4.9 yards per attempt. Definitely going to be a rush-heavy offense here against this UNLV defense.
Yeah, and their top pass catcher, Alec McAllister, hasn't played in a couple of weeks. It looks like he's not going to play anytime soon. He's injured, and looks like he's going to be transferring. Actually, that is so. Big loss there. He hasn't played in a couple of weeks though, so they've certainly come to grips and adjusted without him. Gianti, second leading pass catcher. Billy Bowens, he's third at 21 receptions. And then Stephon Cobbs, I believe he's also a little banged up, hasn't played the last couple of games. So they're pretty thin at pass catcher. It's going to be a lot of rushing here. Should be fun to watch. The offensive line's been, pretty solid unit. Casey at left tackle, he's been a pretty good run blocker. Hasn't been the greatest in pass protection. A pretty sound player in Ben Dooley at his guard position. At center, it's been, Mason Rudolph and Garrett Curran playing in there, and they've been, below average in pass protection, I would say. The right side, Roger Karen. And then at right tackle, Cade Bredsford. He's been a phenomenal pass blocker for them this season. But, it's an all right offensive line from Boise State. Leading you to the UNLV offense. This is a team that certainly has been very shocking under Barry Odom this year. Them to be able to host this game certainly been mightily impressive. 35.5 points per game from this unit. Led by quarterback Jaden Maiva, a freshman from the city, 6'4", 220. Looks like he was a hidden gem just sitting right under their nose, Nick. 64% comp rate, 2,600 yards, 14 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He's also showcased a little bit of his wheels with a positive rushing total, and he also has 3 scores there. And, this was a nice receiving core. Ricky White, Michigan State transfer, is probably the best pass catcher in the conference. He's clearly talented. A couple years ago, he was able to pick Michigan apart. 76 grabs, 1,300 yards, 7 touchdowns. That's over 100 yards per contest. 17 yards per catch. That's highly, impressive. Jacob DeJesus, 46 for 456. Then you got a couple of other guys down here in the 200 yards mark. But it's really going to be led by Ricky White, Nick, and DeJesus will be there if they need him, about his 4 receptions per game. But this is going to be a high-flying passing attack from UNLV. What do you think of this young freshman that they found?
This is a very fun passing attack to find. And when you have a quarterback, like you said, who's literally just sitting in your laps and you can grab him from your local area, that's fantastic recruiting and great job by the staff to be able to make sure that he was able to stay home and grab a talented player like they have. 64% comp rate, 2,600 yards, 14 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Great ratios from the true freshman. Just a fantastic start for his career. I expect him, potentially to transfer at some point. in his career. A really solid player. Ricky White, a great wide receiver. So fun to watch. 1,300 yards, 17.2 yards per grab, 7 scores. Jesus as well is fantastic. His average per catch, is not great at 9.9 yards per catch, but 4.56 and 2 scores is fine. They have some other players as well further down the line that can get some catches, but this is really the Ricky White show. They're going to throw to him a whole lot. He's going to be their target. This offense is efficient, and they score a lot, 35.5 points per game. They're solid through the air. 14 touchdowns to 8 interceptions, total yards per play 6.22. Solid numbers overall. This is a fun passing attack to watch, and overall fun UNLV offense that scores a lot.
Yeah, and their running attack is just as sound in terms of production. Donovan Laster, he's third on the team with 449 yards, 9 scores. Jaden Thomas, another freshman, 501, 12 touchdowns. Very impressive. Atlanta, Georgia native. And then Vincent Davis, the Pittsburgh transfer, 5 scores, 667 yards, 4.6 yards per carry as a team, about $187 on the ground. Also as a team, they've yet to eclipse 200 yards, since the 21st of October. Efficiency has certainly went down a good bit. Production as well. They've been finding into the end zone though. 36 total touchdowns. They've scored a rushing touchdown in every single game this year. It's almost a guarantee they're going to find the end zone in this game, Nick. But efficiency and overall effectiveness might be a little dried up.
Some of the efficiency is concerning 4.64 yards per attempt on the ground. 36 touchdowns, though, is an incredible number. Javion Thomas has leading the way with 12 total touchdowns, 500 yards on the ground, 4.7 yards per carry. Vincent Davis, 6.67, 5.7, and 5 for him. Lester, as well, has 449 and 9 scores. So they spread it out. They got a bunch of different players. They nearly have 2 double-digit scorers on the ground. It's not super efficient, but they do get the job done. And, 36 touchdowns on the ground is a really impressive number when you think about it.
Yeah, their offensive line, it's probably the best in the conference, led by a strong right side, Tiger Shanks at right tackle, at right guard, Armani Trigg right. These guys are phenomenal this season. Jack Haas at center. He's been all right himself, hasn't given up a sack. Alani McKee at his left guard spot has been pretty sound in pass protection. And the guy next to him, a left tackle, they've been rotating a couple different guys out there. That's probably the weakest position on this offensive line. But overall, pretty sound unit, Nick. It's going to lead them to the way. What are your thoughts overall on these offenses? Who do you think has the edge? Because obviously it's going to be a lot of balance, and UNLV clearly has more of it.
I think it is going to be UNLV edge here. I think this offense is just better playing at home. I do like the tempo they run. I like how they're able to throw the ball. They have a better passing attack than Boise State does. They got a good balance. They really can run a 50-50 offense, and I think UNLV has to get the nod for me on offense.
Now looking at that Boise State defense, early on in the year they didn't look great. They got pummeled by Washington. UCF ran all over them. 500 plus yards. They gave up less than 20 points in that one, though. They didn't look great against Memphis. And then, they got into the second half of the season here, and they've been much better. They've only allowed over 400 yards twice. Both of those were in losses, though, where they allowed 30 plus points. Completely stifled Wyoming, only 112 total yards. The last 3 games, they've held opponents to under 380 each in, big wins. They're able to cover at home against Air Force and then, massively against Utah State and New Mexico. The run defense, it's been pretty good this year. Obviously against UCF, they got hammered. They held Air Force to only 206 yards. Obviously, that's a run-heavy offense, one of the top, yard per game marks in the country. Other than that, though, it's really hard to find many opportunities where they struggle. They have given up 20 touchdowns this year. A bulk of that came over the first half of the year. And the yardage, per attempt, 3.9 yards per carry. I think this run defense is certainly going to be something they lean on. Andrew Simpson at his linebacking spot, 15 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks. Ahmad Hazin at his defensive end spot also has 15.5 TFL, 12 sacks. These are some guys that really get into the backfield. The rest of the linebacking core, it's pretty iffy. It's kind of beat up. DJ Schramm, Marco Notarani, these guys have been hurt. I'm not really sure the availability of Marco. What do you make of this right here, Nick? You also have a veteran, Dimitri Washington, who only played a couple of games this season, and he hasn't played in a long time, so his loss has certainly been a little missed. But I think they got enough playmakers here to be able to slow down this run. He certainly proved it last week against the Falcons.
I think this is a good unit that has some nice players overall. 25.3 points per game, given up 3.94 allowed on the ground. It's a pretty solid rush defense, 20 touchdowns given up overall. This is a good front part of this defensive unit. I think there are some physically good players here. Ahmad Hassan is a good player with 48 total tackles, 15 half tackles for loss, 12 sacks. I think that's a really good number from him. He's a big physical guy coming off that edge. They tend to play him, on either side of the edge. He's a very solid player as well. I like what I've seen out of him so far this season. He has been an exciting player to watch for this team. They have some other good numbers. Andrew Simpson obviously is a big leader on this team with the 59 total tackles. He has a pick, 15 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks. Really good numbers from him overall. I really like what I've seen out of him so far. Dimitri Washington's another guy who was hurt, but is still a really talented player. If he can get in and play him at some point, he is a very talented player. With his limited appearances, he still has good numbers, 21 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. This is a unit that has good rotational depth. They do get after the backfield a lot. They're pretty solid against the run, like I said, under 4 yards per attempt for their opponents. A very good front part of this defense.
Yeah, look in the secondary, they certainly also had some issues in the first half of the season. Since then, they've really bounced back. Gave up 300 plus to Fresno State in that loss. Got hammered against Colorado State. So this is something UNLV is going to look to exploit. But the Boise defense over the last couple weeks since then, they've been very sound. This is a team that's allowed 254 yards per game through the air. They do have 9 interceptions. They're going to need guys to step up. Ty Benefield, he's been good. Alexander Tabidner at his safety spot. Avavian McCoy, Jalen Clark. These are guys who have been all right, but they need to be certainly better in terms of consistency, especially when it comes to covering up Ricky White. Certainly going to need to see a lot more playmaking from this back end. I think UNLV is going to look to have a lot of success against, in the short to intermediate range. 125th nationally in 10-plus yard passing plays allowed by Boise. So that's certainly not a good omen going into this ball game. Sayai Oladipo, he's going to be the tone setter back here in the secondary. Do you think they have enough to, withstand this Rebel passing attack?
This is not a terrible unit. It's not a great unit either. It's kind of one of those middle of the road units. 16 touchdowns to 9 interception ratio. Pass rating for their opponents is 139.11. I think Oladipo is a fantastic, good leader. 59 total tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 4 picks. Tunabear as well. He leads the team with 63 total tackles, 4 pass breakups, and a pick for him. Jaden Clark, 8 pass breakups. They're probably their best coverage asset. 43 total tackles for him. Amarian McCoy, 5 pass breakups, 2 picks. 25 total tackles for him. Ty Benenfield as well. 35 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 2 pass breakups. So this unit has some solid pieces, some good veteran leadership here. They have a tough task going against this passing attack for UNLV and certainly Ricky White. But I think they have an opportunity to step up and potentially cut some points off the board by getting a pick or two.
Yeah, you look at the Rebel defense. Barry Odom certainly has come in here and he's made this defense much better. You look at some of the matchups in this game you want to see Boise try to take advantage of it. It's going to be the run defense. This has been a very poor part for this football team, especially the last couple of weeks. San Jose State had their way with them. Air Force had 344. For the most part this year against conference, they've been strong. They even looked solid against Michigan, held them to only 179. Still gave up over 5 and almost a half yard per play. They certainly stifled Fresno State as well. So for the most part, they've been really good. The last 2 games certainly could be some outliers, but it's not great going into this matchup. Their top tackle for loss guy, Jare Williams, only played 4 games this year, and that's not great. He's still number 1. Jackson Woodard, Jalen Dixon, these guys are phenomenal, especially Woodard at his linebacking position. Him and Marcel McDuffie are going to be the leaders here for them. I think this is a good defensive line, though. A lot of players have stepped up. You look at guys like Darius Johnson. He's been great for them. Fisher Kamek at his edge position whenever he's played has been effective. Aussie Ogbasi, solid players. Alex Whitmore. They have a lot of rotation on this defensive line. Lack of production is a little bit concerning. The pass rush, 24 sacks is solid, but again, the guy who leads them in sacks as well has only played 4 games, so they've certainly struggled to get into the backfield. Alexander Whitmore, one of their defensive linemen, he has 2.5 sacks. He's going to be the guy they lean on. They're able to, get at least a sack in every single game, minus the San Jose State game, since September 16th, so they certainly had a good stretch going there, Nick. But this is not a very good, consistent pass rush, especially when Boise State is going to be in limited drop-back opportunities. Where is UNLV going to be able to create negative plays?
They certainly need to find a way to create negative plays. I think they're going to struggle to do so. The sack numbers are not really fantastic for this defense, which is something that's disappointing if you're a fan of this team. That one of their cornerbacks has 2 sacks, Cam Oliver. So that's one of their highest totals in terms of sacks. So it's really not great when you have a cornerback who's putting up sack numbers. The linebacking duo, though, is fantastic. Jackson Woodard, 105 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, 2 pass breakups. McDuffie as well. Marcel McDuffie is another linebacker, 79 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss. Darius Johnson, 39 total tackles, coming off of that front defensive unit. Tataro Martinson is also fantastic, 26 total tackles. Alexander Whitmore, 26 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks. Good numbers there. Jalen Dixon, 24 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. So he does have tackles for loss, but lacking in that sack department. I think this is a unit that's not terrible. They struggle against the run at times, right? 4.15 attempts or yards per attempt on the ground, 25.6 total points per game given up. Total offense, 5.191 yards per play is a little concerning here. This is a Boise State team that's not really fantastic in throwing the ball. So if this team can find a way to be strong against the run, they're going to win this conference title game. But if they struggle and let Boise State run all over them, it could be a very long day.
Yeah, the UNLV secondary is slightly better. They have 13 interceptions. They're up to 39 allowed through the air. They also really struggled for the most part in the first half of the year. Last couple of weeks they've also really tightened up. Didn't have the greatest of efforts against San Jose State. It seems like everyone's teed off on Wyoming. Air Force obviously a bit of a dud there. For the most part though, this is a secondary that also really struggles deep. And obviously with Boise State having some of their top guys out, you're really not sure who's going to be able to expose them. 125th nationally in 30-plus passing yard plays allowed. So they're not very good downfield, and Boise State certainly wants to look and take advantage of that. And not having some of those experienced guys in there might lead to them kind of passing this over on the scouting report. And I think Boise could certainly exploit that. Cameron Oliver, you alluded to him. He's probably been their their best coverage guy. Jet Elad at safety, he's having a pretty sound season. Other than that, though, it's really hard to find guys who've been able to stay healthy for the most part in this secondary. This is a unit that's certainly, again, struggled in the first part of the season. This matchup seems to be one they could be certainly good in, but kind of having mix and match and all that could certainly be a bit of an issue. Nick, Jackson Turner, one of those transfers from Arizona has been sound this year. So they have a handful of guys I think they can lean on. For the most part, this seems like an opportunity where they might struggle if they're not prepared.
It's an interesting unit. They could potentially struggle. I do think they have a nice matchup potential here. I like Jackson Turner, like you said, the transfer from Arizona, 55 total tackles, 4 picks. Not really fantastic in coverage, but he does get the interceptions, which I think is interesting. A ball hawking player he is at free safety. Jet Elad, you alluded to him, 55 total tackles, 6 pass breakups, leading the team. Definitely their best coverage asset, 2.5 tackles for loss for him. Jonathan Baldwin as well, 54 total tackles, 4 pass breakups, 2 picks. Cam Oliver, in addition to the 2 sacks he has, and the 45 total tackles, he has 3 interceptions, 4 pass breakups. Solid. Ricky Johnson, if he's healthy, 7 pass breakups, 28 total tackles. Great asset in coverage as well. Some other players down the depth chart. Thomas Anderson has a pick. He has got 20 tackles as well. Jahir Williams has 19 total tackles. His health is very questionable. He was solid at the start of the season. You alluded to him getting hurt, but he's a talented player. Overall, this UNLV team is banged up, but they are a decent unit coming against, more than likely a one-dimensional Boise State offense, which could pose some advantage for the UNLV team at home.
Looking at the tail of the tape team comparisons, I'm going to give the QB edge to UNLV. Running back edge, that's pretty deep room for UNLV. But I think what the Broncos have with Gianti and Haloni is one of the nation's best. That wide receiver is kind of a clear edge now with all the uncertainty for the Broncos, where the running back is really the top pass-catching option. Even at the offensive line, at the defensive front, even though I think, again, the Rebels have a pretty sound unit there themselves. Plenty of uncertainty for the Broncos in their own right in the middle of their defense, while UNLV seems pretty cut and clear with their duo. Secondary, equally as bad, I would say, Nick. I think these are certainly below-average units that certainly do more bad than good, but they can certainly play competitive football. What do you think of these tail of the tapes here?
I think it's a fair, comparison for these teams. They are talented teams. I think quarterback has to go to UNLV. I think the offense in general definitely get the lead in the edge to UNLV. I potentially give the running back room to UNLV as well. I think the offense for UNLV is just better than Boise State at this point. The defense, you might want to give the secondary to Boise State. They have performed slightly better throughout the season. I think these teams are very matched on paper. They're very balanced, but UNLV has a better offense at this point in the season. I think Boise State's playing a better defense.
Looking at the final thoughts and the prediction, keys to the game for Boise. You want to feed those beasts in the backfield, find some pressure as well. And, UNLV, they want to be crushing against that run. Feed Ricky White down the field. And I think you'll certainly see that, but I think they'll be in a lot of long passing opportunities. I think Boise's going to be stout here against the run. I think the Rebels are going to struggle. I think this line's certainly indicative of that. They just lost at home in a, opportunity to, wrap up this championship game. It ended up coming down to the computers because they were unable to get the job done against the Spartans. So I'm going to take Boise State here. I think this rushing attack is going to have a big afternoon. And again, I think they'll just come up with more stops with some of the pressure they can create in this one. Not much of a home field advantage here, even though it's in beautiful Allegiant Stadium. It's not going to be the greatest of turnouts. And I think Boise's going to get the job done here in the Mountain West title game.
I'm going to take UNLV. I like what they have here. This team is leaps and bounds better under Barry Odom. They're a very fun team to watch. The record is certainly something to be proud of. 9-3 in the regular season is a fantastic mark for this team. They're overall a very talented squad that has a very good offense. And a matchup when it comes down to who has the offense, better defense, I just think UNLV's offense is better than Boise State's defense right now. I'm going to take UNLV at home, even though, like you said, it's not really that big of a home atmosphere at Allegiant Stadium. I just like them to win this game, go out and get a Mountain West title. This team has been irrelevant in college football for a very long time. I haven't been to a bowl game in 10 plus years. So things are really not been fantastic at all. It's a tough job certainly out there in Vegas, but Odom has done a good job to get this team to 9 wins. It would be fantastic to cap it off of a conference title game and then go on to play and win a bowl game potentially. This is a fun team that's definitely not getting enough love in the national media, in my opinion. I think they have a great opportunity here to win this conference title against a Boise State team that looks shaky at times this year.
Certainly happy to see this program succeeding. It's me for today's episode. As always, Nick, I appreciate you joining me.
Absolutely looking forward to this great matchup in Vegas.
Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.